I'm going to give Michael Porter the shortest introduction he's ever had. Michael Porter has been my friend for 35 years. He has been my mentor during all of my years of public service. He asked me in 2014 to take on this role, which I did because it was such a privilege to have the opportunity to work with him. He started this organization. Where's Willie Woods? Where's Willie? Willie in the room? Willie Woods. Stand for a second, Willie. Mike may have said this, but I'll say it anyhow. I think the story, and I don't think it's apocryphal, goes like this. After the LA uprising in 1992, Willie, who was a second-year student at Harvard Business School, got to thinking about Dr. Porter, who's the global guru of strategy and competitiveness, and said, what can we do? So he went to see Dr. Porter and said, Dr. Porter, you play this important role. What can we do to revitalize American cities? They're burning up. Dr. Porter said, it's a great idea. Let's do it together. And they put together a plan, and out of that plan came ICIC. Willie has been on our board for all those years, played a hugely important role. Some people were smart enough to make an investment of resources in inner city ventures, which Willie runs in New York, and it paid off handsomely, so we've got some money in the bank to make investments in the future. But Willie, I want to thank you for your leadership and for your vision, going to see Dr. Porter that day. And without any further delay, I'd like to introduce the founder and the chairman of the inner city of ICIC, Dr. Michael Porter.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. It's a very, very unusual and odd feeling that I have being here. I've never had a 25th anniversary of anything. And the fact that we have this group of people here and this extraordinary track record of accomplishment in this organization and the opportunities I think that we have going forward are bigger than ever is just sort of humbling to me. I remember very, very well when Willie showed up in my office and was telling me about the LA riots, and there was a sort of a plan by somebody to do something about it. And Willie went over it with me, and it was clear from listening to him describe what they were going to do to try to solve the problems in LA, wasn't going to work. At that point, there were no ideas about how to think about these areas, how to actually create true revitalization. There was a lot of money to go in and donations and all kinds of sort of help, but there was nothing that would ultimately be sustainable. And it's through that work, which took some of my other work on competitiveness that I've worked in many other countries to apply, that work was actually put into this context. And out of that somewhat crazy idea came the ICIC. And Willie, you started a very, very large revolution by showing up in my office. And thank you for that. I'll never forget it. I also, Steve has mentioned many other people that I could talk for hours on. I remember it with John Bachman. I met John Bachman in somewhere down, I think it was in New Orleans. It was a big banking meeting. He ran Edward Jones in a big financial services meeting. And I had just published an article, which is some of you may have read, which is called What is Strategy? It was the original article that kind of laid out the fundamental core ideas of strategy. And John Bachman reached out to me before this big event, and he said, could you come to this event, this financial services event? And I said, well, gee, I got a lot of events, that I have to go to. Why should I go? And he said, well, I've actually applied your article to our company. And I want your comments. And it was the first time ever in all of history that anybody had ever applied the concepts in that article. And one of the key ideas in the article was the idea of trade-offs. A strategy is not only what you do, but a strategy critically is what you choose not to do. And that's the concept of trade-offs. If you're going to be really good at this, you may not be able to do all those other things at the same time. And John was so proud that he gave me his list of trade-offs. These are all the not do's at Edward Jones. And of course, Edward Jones has proven to be a very distinctive, enormously successful, highly differentiated financial services company for all these many years. And so all these things that cross your life and come together ultimately make a big difference. I had extensive conversations with the Secretary of Treasury in these days, and who was, and I'll think of which secretary I'm talking about in a minute. Anyway, I was and we got into a conversation about inner cities. And his view was, well, look, we got to fix the public education system. And until we fix the public education system, your idea of building businesses isn't going to work. And I said, Mr. Secretary, did you know that there are thousands of businesses already in inner cities? You just never seen them or thought about them. And my view, and my view today is, if we're going to have sustainable communities, it has to have an economic foundation. It has to have a business foundation. It can't be based on social investment. To be self-sustaining, it has to have its own sustainable economic value creation going on. And again, that was a sort of seminal moment in putting these concepts together and moving the ball forward. I had the opportunity to play golf with Bill Clinton on Hilton Head 4 New Year's days in a row in the morning. And I'll tell you, I was quite a golfer in some earlier incarnation, but when you have to go play with President Clinton and people can see you, it was a court, it was public. That was very intimidating. So I practiced, and luckily I was better than he was. So I once had a 0 handicap, and we went out and played, and we got to know each other really well. And out of that came the Opportunity Zone. The Opportunity Zone program today is another version of a program that Bill Clinton started many, many years ago, because we got to understand and talk about this issue of how do we revitalize communities now that are somehow not achieving what they need to achieve to provide good quality of life for their citizens. So again, those are just a few more anecdotal examples of how a lot of forces have come together. And I can't imagine where we are today in this country. This issue that we are talking about today, and this issue that all of you are the front line on in America, is the issue of our age. Inequality, shared prosperity. There's a tremendous, ironically, a tremendous backlash against capitalism. What we do. And so, I think we've made enormous progress in this area. There's great work across the country. There's thousands and thousands of companies that we've recognized and many that we don't know, but we wish we did. There's a tremendous progress in economic development thinking now in urban areas, which ICIC has played a big role in trying to seed that work. But my gosh, we're far from done. And we've got to, and we're in a political environment which is very hostile to capitalism and to business's role. And we simply have to change that. If you listen to the Democratic debates talking about business, and you sat in this room and listened to what's happened in the last half hour, it's like the candidates are on the wrong planet. They don't get it. They just don't get it. They don't get how our country works. They don't get how our country has been successful for so many years. They don't get it. And what we're trying to do now is we have to succeed at this work. Because it's not just our companies or our organizations that are at risk. It's really the whole concept of our republic and how it works, and are the key principles that underlie how it works. So I've heavily edited all the things I could say about this 25-year journey to get here. But the ones I mentioned, I hope, are just adding to your sort of the mosaic that you have of what this all is and what it's all about and what it could be. And obviously, I have to conclude in introduction here by thanking Steve Grossman. Steve, I remember very vividly the day in my office he came over. He had been treasurer of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So many of you know that. And he stepped down from being treasurer. He ran for governor. He was very well respected, but he didn't win. So he showed up at my office, and he said, "Mike, I think I've done my thing with politics. I'd like to, found some other things to do. Do you have any ideas?" Okay. I had an instant idea, which you know what the idea was. But I was afraid to ask him because I was afraid he would say no. Steve Grossman was born to be the CEO of ICIC. This is his calling. This is his purpose. This is what the energy and the passion and the purpose and the commitment that he's put into this and the leadership he has, because he's built great companies and he knows how to run things really well, have been extraordinary. So no, we haven't had a round of applause for Steve Grossman, but we're going to have it now. Thank you. Okay, well, what I'd like to talk about now is put some of the things I just said in maybe a little bit of context. And it has to do with the role of business in our society, in America. We have the same issues everywhere in the world, but what I'd like to talk about today is primarily our situation here in America, where we have been, a very much business-centric society. We've had a business that played a major role in economic growth here and many other things. So, but we're at a very, very delicate and important moment because, as I said earlier, despite the fact that we have companies in this room doing what you're doing, we had a roundtable yesterday, a procurement roundtable, with 20 or 30 of the largest companies in America. And we spent an entire day talking about all the creative things they were doing to try to grow new businesses and enhance communities and improve the business environment and nurture new suppliers and all this other stuff. And I remember telling everybody there at the end of that conversation, I wonder what the politicians would say if they heard all this. Would they still say what they say? We're at a very awkward moment. Do you know that certain age groups in America now have a greater support for socialism than capitalism? Now, most of them don't know much about socialism, unfortunately, because if you know it, it isn't pretty. We have this loss of faith in business. We have this questioning of business, which the root cause of which has been the inequality and lack of opportunity that many of our citizens have today, which is real. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we have been singled out as a big problem, and that's not fair. There's a lot of problems. Public education doesn't work. Our infrastructure stinks. Our regulatory system is very convoluted. Our legal system is very high cost. And we have lots of things that are causing our issues in our economy right now. But business is not the cause. But right now we are right in the sweet spot of what people are picking on. And so we have a tremendously difficult situation we're in. And I think a question everybody in business is thinking about now is, what do we do as businesses? What do we do to create a different view of business and what we do in society? And there's all kinds of efforts that are bubbling up. In fact, business has been doing things like this for a long time. I'll cover that in a minute. But clearly it's not working that well, because even though we've had CSR programs for years and we've been giving money and we've been very generous and philanthropic and helpful, our legitimacy and our public support is low. And so what do we do about it? And I think the kind of sense is that business has to get involved somehow in not just narrow economic issues, but it has to get involved also in the broader social issues. How do we deal with social problems in America right now? We deal with social problems through NGOs and government. Those have been the institutions in our society that work on social problems. And they do great work, very powerful work. NGOs didn't usually exist. That's a whole new institution. Even I can remember there was almost no NGOs, and then they started growing up and growing up. And it was this new organizational form to tackle societal problems. And they do. And they have NGOs in the room. They do great work. But what we're finding is that NGOs and government haven't got the resources or the leverage to solve these problems fast enough. What's the problem? The problem is frankly, there's no business model. To serve a need, an NGO has to get a donation. And to serve 20 people, they have to get more money than to serve 10. And to serve 40 people, they have to get more money than to serve 20, or 10, and 20, and 30, and so on. Government's got the same problem. If they're going to have a good program to deal with X, first they're going to have to navigate through all the politics to make sure the program is really good, which is a big deal right now. It's hard. But government's also going to have to raise taxes. There's just so much need out there, so many societal problems, that government's kind of drowning in how do I deal with all this, and we just don't have enough money. So we're making very slow progress on a lot of these issues that we all know about. Issues of education, issues of safety, issues of housing, issues of water, issues of everything. There's issues everywhere. In fact, this age is the age of societal issues. And we know more of, everybody knows them now. Every single person knows that we got the environment and climate and water and we hear about it every day. But yet we don't have a functioning institutional structure that's actually making much headway. We're making progress, but it's slow. It's incremental. And fundamentally, that's a resource problem. And it's also a problem because the traditional institutions, government and NGOs, were not designed to do things efficiently and effectively at scale. They do their best with whatever limited resources they have and whatever management capability they have. So what I think is becoming more and more clear, and I think society's got this right, we in business have to start playing in a different way in this issue. Now, I feel a little nervous talking to this group because you all are doing it already. You guys get it. You guys are the frontier. You're the front line. You're the innovators. But mainstream business now, we have to find a way to get mainstream business to rethink and redefine its role beyond just the business role, the profit-making business role, the narrow view of the profit-making business world. And that is a discussion that we're having now, again, in our society in a very, very important way. The latest kind of leading edge of that discussion is something you've all probably heard about, which is the concept of corporate social purpose. About 2 years ago, BlackRock, one of the largest investors, on the face of the earth, the CEO sent a letter out to every one of the CEOs of companies that they own a significant share of, which is almost every big company. And the letter said, you need to have a corporate social purpose. This was an investor telling to a CEO, you need this, okay? And we'll come back to that in a minute. And then about, it was August 19th, the Business Roundtable, which is our most distinguished CEO leadership group that represents the business community in America in a very important way, they issued a statement on corporate purpose. And essentially said, look, all of us, we have to now have a corporate purpose. And that corporate purpose is kind of broader than just maximizing shareholder value, which has kind of been the mantra of business for so many years. This is what you get taught in business school. It's all about shareholder value, maximize shareholder value, figure out what shareholders value, figure out how to do that. That's your job as a business leader, is maximize shareholder value. But I think what's happened is what's been proven is that isn't working. Yes, we're making some money. Yes, we have a lot of great companies. We're still pretty darn competitive in America. Companies are growing. But when your company is doing okay and growing in a society that is questioning your purpose, then we're not in a good place. And that's kind of where we are now. And there's been many, many efforts in many, many companies, including, I'm sure, a large number of yours, who've been wrestling with this for some time. So what I want to do is spend a little time giving you kind of an overview of how do we think about this? Where have we come from? Where does social purpose fit? And what do we need to do as companies if we're really going to make a discontinuity here? How would we approach this? And this applies to every company, large or small. Everyone in this room has to figure out what your company stands for, what you're going to be doing in your community or more broadly to try to have impact beyond just whatever business you're in. The business you're in is great. Doing business actually creates a lot of value for a community because you're hiring workers and you're investing in stuff and you're needing real estate. So just business as usual creates a lot of societal benefit. And historically, most business leaders will say, well, I don't need to do anything else. If I hire 5 million people and invest $10 billion a year, I've done my part in advancing a broader society. But now I think we're rethinking that. Business as usual is great. We have to run our business well. The better we run it, the more impact we'll have in the traditional ways of jobs, investment, and so forth, compensation for our people. But ultimately, we have to go beyond the idea of just business as usual. And that's what I'd like to talk about over the course of the next few minutes. And it's really the moment of this phase in our history. And for me, it's a scary moment because I do a lot of work today on our political system. And our political system is making this much, much worse right now. Because of the highly partisan, divisive political system, we are collateral damage. We're getting collateral damage from politics. They're picking on us because they see that as a way to get, support for, their campaign or their party or their agenda or whatever it is. So I have a former colleague who was a professor at Harvard Law School. Some of you may have heard of her. And you ought to hear her talk about business. I mean, you know, it's just unbelievable that people of great intellect and great stature and who've been Americans for many years and have observed what's been going on in this country to be taking the tack that they do today. So I think we can't do anything that we shouldn't do just to be popular, but we've got to rethink what we are doing to see if we can actually do business better. And I think this is a moment where we are learning to do business actually even better. We're learning that capitalism has even more interesting, powerful characteristics than we thought it did. But we're having to kind of take a broad view of what business is, what do we do, what's our job as business, how should we engage in society, is that a role we can play, and so on and so on and so on. Now, this whole conversation started in a very unfortunate way, many, many years ago. Everybody here heard of Professor Milton Friedman? Milton Friedman, one of the great economists of all time, free market economist, professor, you know, I think he was at MIT for most of his career. And he wrote a little article, which you can read if you want, but, you know, have a drink handy if you do. And the article says, the social responsibility of business is to maximize its profit. Period. That's it. And any use of resources to do anything else is a misuse of shareholders' money. Okay? So this idea got implanted in America as companies started struggling with what do we do? What do we do about making our society better? Companies, we all realize there's lots of issues in our communities that we'd love to fix. All kinds of issues. But what our role should be, Milton Friedman said, just do business as usual, stop there, and then other solutions are going to have to address all these other issues. And Milton Friedman was wrong. I'll tell you why in a minute. We'll get more deeply into what was his fundamental, how did he screw this up? How did such a brilliant person not get it? But he didn't, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when I give you a little more background, okay? But that really set us back, and the net result of Milton Friedman was the early efforts in business to deal with social impact were very, very limited. And they were done with sort of almost trepidation. Because Friedman didn't even like philanthropy. Now, you shouldn't be giving your shareholders money in philanthropy. It's not your money. Let your shareholders give the money. That was the Friedman argument. But companies said, no, companies were getting a lot of pressure to do something and be helpful. So the first big wave of what we did in business to try to improve our societal conditions was philanthropy. And many of you do that probably in one way or another, either personally or even through your company. Most major companies now have a corporate foundation. There's active giving. The high water mark of corporate philanthropy was Target Corporation, that we all know. And Target decided they were going to give 5% of their pre-tax income to philanthropy every year. And they still do that today. And for them, they're a multi-billion-dollar company and very profitable, and so that's a lot of money. So they're doing philanthropy at a very large scale. Other companies, you know, vary in how much of it they do. Philanthropy is good. I think we should be giving. I think that's part of what we do as organizations and as human beings and as leaders. We do give, and we should keep giving. And it's going to be appreciated, and it's going to matter. But the problem with philanthropy as our way in business to change the world is it's very hard for it to be really powerful. Part of it is our own mistake. Part of it, too many companies have a budget for philanthropy, and they spread the budget around about 17 different organizations. Because you give a little bit to all the organizations, all the people you know, and all the people you're partnering with, and eventually you give a little bit to all these organizations in 25 different social fields, and none of those organizations has enough resources to really do something big. The problem we have in philanthropy, in NGOs in general, is scalability. They can do a project for 25 homeless people or one little region of the city, but they can't deal with the whole city. They can't deal with the whole country, okay? So the problem with philanthropy is fundamentally that there are limits on how much we can actually give. We can't give 75% of our profits. We just can't. I mean, we need to have that profit to reinvest in the business, you know, and there's only so much we can do. We can only volunteer so much. If our staff is out volunteering all day, every day, and 75% of our staff are volunteering, there's nobody going to run the business. So the problem with philanthropy is it's not leveraged. If we give to this, then that takes away from that. Okay, it's kind of, philanthropy is kind of a form of redistribution. And again, redistribution is good. We need to have a progressive system where those who have more help those who don't. But philanthropy as the business tool for changing the world has not proven to be a very powerful way to do it. In fact, most companies they're not cutting back, but they're really focusing their philanthropy. I have here a few notes. If you do philanthropy, the most important thing to do is pick a very few areas, concentrate your resources in those few areas, and don't just give the money. Help the NGO use the money well by supporting them, because they got managerial issues, and you can help them actually execute on using the philanthropy. So just don't give money and think you're done, you know. So we've learned about how to do corporate philanthropy very well, and I'm saying everybody should do it at some level. And it might not be corporate, it might be your personal, but we should all do it. I think it sends the message we should want to send, and we must send in the kind of society we want to have. So we need to do that. But it did not make much of a difference on the social problems in America. It helped, but it didn't solve. Okay. So what was next? Well, the next stage of this whole discussion was, well, we have to have a CSR program, corporate social responsibility program. And that goes beyond giving a little money. That's actually about doing things. Corporate social responsibility said companies need to do more things than just give money. And by the way, we'll post this presentation if anybody's interested. Thrilled to have you look at it more carefully. So CSR is really about taking some specific kinds of actions, and the NGO community kind of teed up a lot of this for us, and then gave us a lot of pressure to do it. So you can see some of the key things. Compliance with ethical and community standards. It seems obvious, but a lot of companies were just out of sync. They were doing stuff that didn't work. I mean, who was it? Ralph Lauren had fur, animal fur, in some of their products. And that was out of sync with where society was. And they got attacked for that. And finally, the company figured out that, look, we got to comply with community and ethical standards. If our community doesn't think fur is a good thing, then we shouldn't be using it, okay? And it was that they were tone deaf. For decades, they didn't understand this. They didn't hear what the community really wanted and what they really expected. And CSR was really a lot about how do we get ourselves a hearing aid, you know? So we can hear how people are thinking about some of these things that we end up doing in business. So it's about compliance with standards. A lot of companies now collect certifications. So you have to get certified as with this organization, and certified with this green, and certified with this sustainability, and certified with this sourcing practices. And all those sustainabilities and certifications we now get are just to prove that we're following good practice, best practice. And that has been a good thing, I think. Sometimes these certifications are not as perfect as we'd like to see them, but I think that, again, the bar has been raised. Corporate practice is higher in many of the areas affected. A big theme of CSR was sustainability. At one level, I love the word sustainability because it's very evocative. The problem with sustainability is it could mean almost anything. Sustainability of what? Sustainability of employment, sustainability of environmental impact. In environment, it's pretty clear what it is. You're not going to wreck the environment today, and so you don't have it tomorrow. That doesn't make any sense. But there's a lot of broader uses of the word sustainability that are, again, hard to understand, but people have been soldiering away at this. And as I mentioned certifications. The fundamental purpose of CSR was reducing risk and any harm that we were causing. Let's not harm. Let's stop the harm. So if we're polluting, let's stop polluting. If we're killing animals for our coats, let's stop doing that. We gotta behave in a way that builds trust. So this problem that I've been talking about, this problem of trust and legitimacy and how we're viewed, this problem has been now around for a long time. And this was the first serious effort to deal with it. We've got to improve our reputation. Right now, people don't like us, or they don't like business, and so we have to do something about that. And we have to be seen as good people doing good things. And the number one consulting type of consulting firm that consults on CSR is PR firms. So it's fundamentally about image and about progressing a good image. Every day, almost every day, I get a CSR report from some company in my office at HBS, and they're getting pretty thick. And I read through that report, and by about page 6, I'm almost in tears at how wonderful the company is. We're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're helping this, we're doing this, okay? And again, CSR was a great step forward. It got us out of sort of the dark ages of being tone deaf and not kind of realizing and perceiving the impacts we had and the things that were going to kind of be corrosive to the view of what we do. So it made progress. But I think, unfortunately, like philanthropy, it hasn't been powerful. It's been good. It makes things better. It hasn't changed the world. It hasn't solved big problems. It hasn't addressed big issues. It's a lot of companies making little contributions to a lot of issues. You go into a company today and they always have recycling bins everywhere. Every company will have them. And you better put your paper in the right container, But is that going to solve, the sustainability of the use of paper or, anything else? Well, probably not. The other problem with sustainability and corporate social responsibility is the word responsibility. And that word, whoever invented the word responsibility for this phrase should be, I don't know. I'm being socially good today. We can't be mean. But the problem is it was focused on responsibility, not impact, not results, okay? And therefore, it's just been, lots of little improvements that have kind of raised the bar in general. They've affected the landscape, the atmosphere. I think they've helped get our employees in the right place and us. But we haven't had a real strategy to make CSR powerful. I don't know of a CSR program that has solved the problem of inadequate housing in any region, or has reformed the healthcare system in any region, or has whatever. Because it's something that companies do incrementally, on the side. It's not really connected to the business. And as we'll see later, those are all very, very limiting factors. Okay, so what's the next phase? This phase we're in right now, most of you have heard of ESG indicators, or GRI. ESG is environmental, social, and governance. And that's a set of standards that you're supposed to comply with in terms of your governance standards, your environmental standards, and there's a rating system. And this ESG thing, and GRI is Global Reporting Initiative, and that's another sort of sister measurement system for, again, societal impacts. These measurement systems came from investors. And investors started hearing from their clients, and their clients told them, look, we want to put our money in companies that are doing good things. And investors said, remember the investors? Those were the guys. The social responsibility of business is to maximize its profits. Okay. And the investors said, no, that's not what we want to invest in. We don't want to invest in companies that believe that. And so I think a reason for being that goes beyond profit is probably a better way of saying it. I would rewrite his letter if he let me. Okay? Purpose is not the sole pursuit of profits, but the animating force for achieving them. Okay, this is interesting, and so let's remember this phrase. We'll come back to this a little bit later. But it says that, look, we're in business to make a profit. Let's all agree. We are in business to make a profit. But what is going to allow us to be really, really good at it? And the implication here is if we think in this broader way about who we are and what we're doing and why, we'll be able to do better. We'll be more successful. Profits are in no way inconsistent with purpose. In fact, purpose and profits are inextricably linked. And we'll talk a lot about that. That is the most important bullet point here. Because this is going to be the key. If we can connect purpose, or whatever we're going to call it, to the business and to profit, that will solve every single social problem in the world. Because if we can make a social impact and do it at a profit, what can we do that nobody else in all of history has ever been able to do? We can scale. If we can make a profit doing homeless, low-cost housing for 25 people and make a profit in low-cost housing and affordable housing, if we can do it for 20 people, we can do it for 40, we can do it for 1 million, we can do it for 1 billion. Okay? And this is the key to unlocking the problem we've had in the world. We've had lots of ways to make things a little better, a lot of valiant efforts by a lot of very purposeful, driven people to make things better, but we have had no mechanism to do it at scale. And now we're kind of on the threshold of that, so we'll come back to that in just 1 minute. When a company truly understands and expresses its purpose, it functions with the focus and strategic discipline that drive long-term profitability. So that's a little bit about, again, business thinking and how we think about our strategy. And when we have this kind of a dimension to it, then it's going to be a really powerful tool for focusing our efforts. And it, guides culture, consistent decision making, and ultimately it helps shareholders, but it helps them in a different way than the traditional way, which is just you need to make the maximum shareholder return. Okay? So we've got a lot of purpose statements out there now. I was going to read them, but I decided you wouldn't like it. I have 11 pages of purpose statements from about 75 companies. And I would give them a grade of C- at this point. They're mostly very broad. Our purpose is to feed the people of the world. Our purpose is, stuff like that, okay? And the problem we have with the whole concept of purpose, we still haven't got a crisp, clear definition of what that really means in ways that will connect it to our business. So that is a big gap that we have. And we believe very strongly that if we're going to make purpose important, if it's going to change anything, we've got to integrate purpose with capitalism. We can't have it as an add-on. It's got to be part of how we think about competing. And that leads to this article that I wrote with Mark Kramer. Business Roundtable, just very briefly, also issued its own statement. They did something revolutionary, which is they said shareholder value isn't the most important goal of the company. And that created quite a stir. The people that booed the loudest were the Council on Institutional Investing, because they'd been at the top of the heap, and now this said no, that's not a good way to do it. But once again, the Roundtable, although it's been a little clearer in some areas, and here is there's a little bit here about what their commitments are. On the bottom is important. It's kind of a stakeholder idea that says we're going to actually invest and deliver value to our customers. Now, we always try to do that, but I think the idea here is value is a little broader than historically we thought about it. We're going to invest in our employees, not just figure out how little we have to pay them to get them to take the job. We're going to invest in our community. So the Roundtable took it further than BlackRock. But it's still not clear exactly what a purpose is, what's the definition, and how do we integrate it into actually running the company. And there, I think we need to take one more leap. And the leap is this concept that we introduced in the 2011 article, which is the concept which we call creating shared value. And this is back to something I said a minute ago. There is no inconsistency between social benefit and profit. None, if we do it the right way. Sustainability is profitable. I can't believe it. I'm an economist, PhD economist. My economics colleagues thought that if you were more environmentally sound, that would raise your cost. There's a giant literature on this in economics. If you want to be cleaner or safer, it's going to raise your cost. No, 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 no. It's the opposite. If you don't burn 20 trillion gallons of gasoline with your truck fleet because you can do it better, you're going to actually make more money. So the whole key here to this issue is we've got to connect the social to the business. We've got to see how those relate. And of course, that connection is going to be different in every business because we're all in different businesses. We're going to have different ways to create that profitable impact. Shared value is addressing a societal need with a business model. Alternatively, way of saying that is at a profit. So we're going to improve our energy emissions at a profit. We're going to improve our products in terms of their healthiness at a profit. You know, Nestle many years ago took a lot of sugar and salt out of as many of their products as it could. It turns out to be a hard food engineering problem to make it taste okay and all that. but they put massive resources into it. And they said they were going to do this, but they didn't say anything about the results. And what they just announced this year is all the products where they took out the salt and the sugar and all those kind of things, those have been the fastest growing products and the highest margin products. Because that's what the customer wanted. And they were an innovator in delivering, the value that the customer really wanted, and that gave them a better business, okay? Companies have been afraid to talk about social impact that creates a profit. Because profit is now an evil idea in our society. Despite the fact that, as I've said several times, profit is the magic of the capitalist system. If we can do something at a profit, we can scale it. We can be global. If we're doing something that's a giveaway, we can only give away so much. If we're losing money, we can't do much. If we're just breaking even, we can't do much. But if we can find a profit model to build affordable housing, then we can build tons of affordable housing. And we will have a tremendous impact on that problem, instead of giving a little money for this affordable housing, project. Okay, so basically what we've come to the view of, and this is still radical. I don't know if I can get Larry Fink to agree with me yet. I'm going to try. Purpose equals creating shared value. The purpose of a company is to compete in a way that addresses significant societal challenges while also competing profitably and therefore sustainably. And I think what we're starting to see is that we're starting to see more and more companies veer in this direction. Now, let me give you a few examples, and I've got to speed up my time because I'm running out of time. Again, I told you I had a big fight with a lot of economists about, is profit consistent with social impact or not? This slide talks about that. Think energy efficiency is profitable, environmental improvement is possible, financial inclusion, getting people included in the financial system is profitable, better education actually isn't profitable for a company who takes advantage of that better education, and so on and so on. So workforce safety is hugely profitable. It's the most profitable thing you can do is eliminate accidents. But yet we had this mindset that doing all those good things was too expensive and we didn't have to do those. But we're now learning the opposite. We're learning that where we have social issues that our company touches and they're broken, almost always it's going to create costs for us that we could avoid if we could fix those social issues. And that is the great insight, I think, that it gives us the key to how we can actually change, very powerful way, not only what we do as businesses, but also how people feel about us as businesses. Shared value comes in 3 levels. Some of you have seen the article probably. We'll make it available to anybody that's interested. You have 3 tools. You have your products. What's your product do? Is it full of salt, sugar, and fat or not? Things like that. Is your housing affordable? Therefore, it's going to serve needs that are unmet now. We have lots of housing for people that can afford it. The real innovation is to compete in housing in a way that people can actually afford it. All people. The second part of shared value is the value chain, our operating model, how we going about doing business. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the third part of shared value is the business ecosystem in which we live. Do we have other companies around that can be our suppliers? And if we can do that, then we're gonna start the ball rolling on making ourselves more efficient by the improved opportunities for other people. Here's a great example of a shared value company, a shared value strategy, Discovery Health. Here's their corporate purpose: to make people healthier and enhance and protect their lives. Okay, very nice statement. The key about purpose is how. How. And in their case, they did something totally innovative. They put a health plan together with a health and wellness program and used all the insights from behavioral economics to create incentives in the health and wellness program for people to participate. And if they did, not only did they get healthier, which they were able to prove, you know, they have massive data on this. People live longer if they're participating in this program. If they do well in the program, then the cost to the insurance company goes down. Because the insurance company's cost depends on how many times you have to go to the doctor, and how many problems you have. And so what Vitality said was, if you're participating well in the health and wellness program, not only will that make you feel better, and not only will you have a lot of cool incentives, but we'll actually lower your premiums. We'll lower your premiums for your health insurance. And this is the largest health insurance company in the world. You know where it started? South Africa. But they had this insight about how to create a synergy between their business and the most important social needs that they touched. And boom. Boom, they're a world leader. What we find today is many of the greatest opportunities for innovation in every business are not the standard stuff. We've already done the features and fitness and, you know, stuff like that. We've already done all that. What we haven't thought about is this issue. How can we add that societal impact into our strategy to either make ourselves more efficient or to make our products incredibly better? You know, where the really good banks today are going after the underbanked. You know, the 25% of Americans don't have a real useful financial relationship with a real financial institution. And that costs them tons of money and tons of heartache in getting a little loan or cashing a check or whatever it is. The banks have realized that the biggest market they have is one that they used to think was horrible. It was a rotten market. Poor people. Turns out that these poor people that didn't have a bank account, that's the future of most financial services firms. And that's what they're trying to figure out. You know, PayPal has figured that out. And they're primarily competing in the small business space. Some of you may have worked with them. They found a way to get you, with the collateral of your AR and so forth, loans at much lower cost than you could otherwise get, even if you could get one. Here's a company that may be in this room. This is a company that has been ICIC partner company, Terracycle. Founded in 2001, the mission was, or their purpose was, eliminating the idea of waste. What a clever way of framing it. Across 20 countries, partner with leading consumer products companies, et cetera, to recycle products and packages that would otherwise end up in the landfill. Now, so they're saying, look, every company would benefit from this. And if we can figure out how to do it really better than any one company will ever do it, then we got a giant business here. And you can read the rest. This company is growing. It's amazingly successful. The innovation is not a standard type of innovation. It was an innovation that had to do with the impact of a very important societal impact, which we all have talked a lot about, is waste, but what to do about it, how to turn it into a strategy. And we're seeing more examples like that. You know, here's another one, Aero Farms. Again, relatively smaller company. Reimagine agricultural production to address the issue of natural resource and land depletion caused by conventional farming. Here's a whole business model focused on shared value. It's not just selling a conventional product to a conventional customer to produce a conventional feature or a conventional service or conventional what. It's a shared value business model. Due to their smaller size, the vertical farms, which is their concept, can be located closer to population centers, reduce transportation costs, and lower emissions by 98%. Better control over the indoor growing environment also. This is actually for inside farming. This is like the people that are growing vegetables inside in containers and things like that. Better control over indoor growing environment creates superior flavor, and they're raising $100 million chunks of venture funding. Okay, so this is a real business. It's explosively growing. It's very profitable. It's a real business, but it's having very, very powerful impacts on the whole indoor hydroponic food production system in the United States. So we see more and more industries where these ideas are where the innovation is coming from. It's not coming from doing business as usual. It's coming from recognizing this fusion between social and economic. Yara is an example of a fertilizer company that's transforming agriculture in Africa and other parts of the world by worrying about building the supporting industries that farmers need. Not just the fertilizer. They don't just sell the fertilizer. They aggregate the other kinds of capabilities that the farming industry needs, like logistics and so forth, to be efficient and effective. So that, again, you can read these if you're interested later. Walmart is a phenomenally interesting example. Many of us in this room are old enough to remember that Walmart was the personification of evil. Walmart was evil. And there's still people that think that. And that's because they paid relatively low wages. They were criticized for not paying generous enough health insurance. And so on and so on and so on. They put a lot of small businesses out of business because they could do it more efficiently, and they got massive criticism from everybody. And what happened to Walmart, and I'm going to try to go as fast as I can here. I'd love to tell the story slowly, but I'm going to go fast. What happened to Walmart was Hurricane Katrina. And when Hurricane Katrina hit, to make a long story short, Walmart personally fed and kept people alive in that entire region. There was no other way to get water. There was no other way to get food. The Walmart logistical system saved thousands and thousands of lives. The management team got together after Katrina, and they said, and after a long discussion, they said, what could we do as a company so that we felt like we do today all the time? Really interesting question they asked themselves. And what they concluded was, we're going to have to think about how we're not just doing business to make a profit, how we're doing more than that in our business to have a really big impact in a variety of areas. So you can see the things they do. They're the leader in organic food in the world at reasonable prices. They're the leader in all kinds of stuff. Their financial services they sell generic drugs for $4 a prescription when they used to be 20 or whatever it was. They have in-house now health services. They have banking services designed specifically for the low-income, underbanked families that don't have a checking account. And it goes on and on and on. You can see all the things they do, all three levels. Just about every company, certainly a big one like this, can do things at all of those levels. You don't have to just pick one. Now, what we're starting to see is, and it's been tough sledding, we're starting to see that people are starting to recognize this issue I've been talking about. What is the synergy between social impact and profitability? And we know Fortune very well, and managed to persuade the editors to create a new list. And this was about 5 years ago. This is actually the 2019 list. And this list is based on shared value. The company has to be making, it has to be profitable, but its profitability has to be materially affected by the social impact that it's making. And the social impact has to be material for whatever the issue is that they're impacting. So you can see some of the companies on this 2019 list. Walmart is on this list. Walmart is the only company ever, probably forever, that has actually been on the list 5 times for 5 years. And we designed the list not to make that possible. You couldn't get on the second year. Because to get on a second time, you had to do something really, really big. You couldn't just do a little more of what you'd already done. You have to come up with something new. They've been innovating so rapidly that they've been on for 5 times. Terracycle, I just showed you, they're on the list. Every one of these companies has a story, but they believe in this conception of what we are in business. We're in business to create shared value. And if we think that way, it's going to make us better companies, it's going to make us more innovative, it's going to help us, sustain ourselves in the long run. You can see the Beyond Meats and Impossible Foods got on there. That was a pretty big innovation. That's pretty material. That's going to make a real difference on food nutrition, hopefully. Others are making more focused impact, but this is where we're starting to go as companies. And purpose itself is just another word. But if we can surround it with the concepts and the principles about competition that we've been discussing, I think we come to a very different place. And then I just want to have one more slide, and that is, okay, where should investors be here? And again, remember, investors were, don't do it. Don't spend a nickel. Don't waste your time on social stuff. We'll mark you down. What it turned out was the companies that made the Change the World list that were public outperformed the indexes by 4 to 5% the year after they were put on the list. So shared value creates alpha. Alpha. This is the Holy Grail. And investors would have thought before that shared value it creates losses. Okay? So we believe, the question we've been asking lately is, what's the social purpose of investing? And our answer is, the purpose of investing is to create a virtuous cycle by allocating capital to those companies that create the greatest societal returns, both in the business as usual activities and in improving the welfare of customers, employees, suppliers, and communities. Okay? So investors have been criticized, and we should criticize them more, because they haven't had a purpose that's good for society. They've had a purpose and a design of their business model that works for them. You make all this money, and I do better. The investor, if I help you make money, then I do better. But ultimately, investors should be out there hunting for the arrow gardens and the examples that I've been talking about. But investors haven't even looked. So let me just conclude. I think I've already said some of these things, but just to wrap this together, the purpose of a business, of your business, and all of you, almost everybody in this room, I'm sure already thinks this way. But I'm just giving you a little more vocabulary and a little more technology to think about it with. Purpose of business is to create economic value in a way that also creates shared value for society. Okay, too many businesses in the past have created economic value while destroying shared value for society. All the banks that gave out free checking accounts with a business model that they would make the money on defaults. So if their customer failed, they'd get rich. Okay? Too many companies have done that. That's one of the reasons why we have a bad name in business. But we've got to flip that. Business acting as businesses, not as charitable givers. We are the most powerful force for addressing many of society's most pressing needs. Why? Because we can do it efficiently and effectively and with a business model, and therefore we can scale it. And we just talked about a bunch of examples. Shared value leverages the synergistic connection between excellence in business and important social impact. A high-quality purpose statement must include the ways a company will create social impact and how this creates self-reinforcing benefits for both the business and for the society. Purpose is the why, shared value is the how, okay? So all of you, you are the heroes of this whole topic. Because not only are you doing tremendous things that have huge impacts on your community, because we study that all the time at ICIC. We know you're doing it. If you're in a neighborhood in an inner city, you're going to have a huge positive impact on that neighborhood, almost always. And most of you are even trying to do more than you have to. Okay? You guys are the front line. But I think all of us need to raise our game in how we think about this issue, be more explicit about it, be more strategic about it, see it as more of an opportunity, not some kind of an obligation or responsibility. And I think I have every real belief that there's not a single problem we have in the world, maybe with the exception of climate change, but maybe even that one, that we can't solve. But we're going to have a different structure, and particularly we're going to have to mobilize us to do it, okay? So that's a pretty tall order for everybody to go home and write this stuff down and figure out what your stance is going to be and look for those innovation ideas that might. This is a pretty tall requirement. But hopefully this session is not, this is a strategy session. It's not just a session about how to be good, how to do good, okay? So I am thrilled that you're all here. Forgive me for taking a little extra time, but I hope everybody will be as proud as we are of yourselves and what you're doing, and will also connect and stay working with us for many, many years to come. So thank you.